Now, imagine this. All right. You take a job with the CIA. Okay. Oh, hold on. Imagine my imagine my intro. Maybe I'll let more people to pile in. Let's see. We're having trouble streaming on X. Oh, well, I guess I'm not streaming on X. It says that they're having trouble. I don't know why they're having trouble streaming on X, but they're having trouble streaming on X. Okay. Anyway, so back to the intro. Okay. So imagine, right? You take a job with the CIA or something. Okay. And at some point, they sit you down and they tell you, okay, here's going to be your mission. You're going to go into a foreign country with a fake name, a cover story, and a cover job. And then you're going to meet and target a particular woman. All right. Maybe they show you the woman that they want you to target or what have you. And then you're going to now start dating this woman and you're going to get her to have sex with you. And then you're going to get her to fall madly in love with you. And then maybe you're going to get her to even marry you and be in a relationship with you for a few years. While throughout the course of this whole process of being in this relationship with this person, you're going to get her to share top secret information that she has access to. Like, imagine if that was your mission. Right now, the CIA doesn't, as far as I know anyway, okay, the CIA doesn't do that anymore and doesn't really do stuff like that. I'll explain why later. All right. But this was a thing. All right. This was a thing, particularly in Russia and Germany. It was some of the most famous cases. And so this is a thing that was really prevalent too during the Cold War. All right. And hi, everybody. I'm Paul, behavioral expert. And today we're going to talk about spies and the espionage and how these guys were able to seduce these women to be able to get secrets out of them. Now, there's a lot of lessons here as far as understanding male and female dynamics and sexual dynamics and relationships and persuasion and how all this fits together. So there's a reason for us to cover it. If you're trying to do better in relationships, and even just, this is more of a relationship dating topic, but still can be helpful for understanding the world, understanding your mindset, and just a lot of lessons with these stories when you look into them. So we're going to look into that stuff today. That's what we're going to do. And so, but could you imagine that though, right? Like some of you guys just get nervous approaching a woman at a bar or something, with no consequences there. Imagine the high stakes of being a spy in another country with a cover that you can't get blown, and your mission is to seduce somebody for secrets. Like imagine that. And imagine how much pressure that would be, right? And imagine the level of skill, right? The level of skill you would have to be able to pinpoint and target a particular woman. And not just to get her to go on a date or give you her Instagram or something, right? But like to actually fall in love with you and to give up information. I mean, that's a big deal. Yet these guys are able to do this with some level of reliability, which is crazy, really, when you think about it, right? So yeah, there's a number of things we can look at and learn when we look at, sexpionage. Everyone's referencing James Bond. Yeah. Well, these are real world James Bonds. I mean, so James Bond is obviously a fictional character, right? But this is like real world shit, though. This is stuff that people actually did. And there's a lot of lessons here that we can learn. All right. And so, and there's a lot of myths too that about women, a lot of myths about seduction, and we can dispel a lot of those myths here today as well when we look into this stuff. All right. So I should just mention too that yes, I have a course that is dropping soon. All right. This isn't this stream is not just a advertisement for the course. We're going to be in a regular, it never is. We're always getting into a real topic. It's just that with all the digital noise, I have to repeat myself a lot when I Do you offer something of value, or else people won't know about it? It'll pass right through their brains. And it's just because we're all inundated with too much digital noise, right? But I do have a course that's dropping, and you can get into my community for free. You can click that link in the description. It'll get you in that community. And sometime next week, I'm going to open Sexpionage 2.0 for enrollment. So Sexpionage is going to talk about, well, not just talk about, but train you on all of these skills. Now, I'm not doing it in a way that's giving up classified information or classified training in any of the training circles in the government. All right. I'm just a disclaimer, but I am giving the skills away in context of how you'll need them, which is dating and relationships, and even just persuasion in regular life. If you are in a sales job or position, or if you're an entrepreneur and you have to collaborate with people, work with others, maybe get investors, maybe have business partners, negotiate deals, any of those things, these sexpionage skills are incredibly valuable. I mean, they're really priceless. And what this whole thing about sexpionage and using seduction as a means to get secrets, I mean, what that tells us is that human beings will in being all right. So here's the thing: being able to predictably do this for missions means that there had to have been some level of probability and predictability that we knew worked. So like when a government sends somebody in with a cover to seduce somebody for secrets, there's a probability that that government has in their risk assessment, knowing that this is actually going to work and we're actually going to get what we're trying to do here. We're putting, we're investing resources and putting somebody at risk and all that stuff in order to get this mission done. So they knew when the Russians did it, the Germans did it, when the Chinese does it. Okay, when we did it, the little bit that we did it, we knew that there was some reliability here. Well, what that means is that human beings and human behavior does have a predictability to it, and that there is skill sets. It's not just chance and accident and horoscopes and magic, that puts two people together. And that's the thing. That's a big thing. If you walk away with nothing else from this stream today, at least know that when you connect with another person, when you connect with a woman, when you get her to fall in love, right? And you fall in love with her and you want to build this life together, that isn't just a chance thing. Now, it might be chance for you in that scenario or for somebody else because, that's just kind of how it happened. But we have behaviors that we've evolved into. Our brains are structured a certain way. It's no more chance than like, I don't know, somebody getting a disease or something, right? It's like we can still cure diseases or prevent diseases, because the human body is structured a certain way, and germs and stuff like that, pathogens interact with us a certain way. So it's not all mystery and magic if somebody gets a cold or gets the flu or gets over the flu, right? I mean, there's certain medical realities, okay? Well, similarly, human behavior has realities to it. We have persuasion skills. There is an ability that you can develop in order to connect with others on a reliably frequent level and a deep level. And developing these skills will make you have better relationships, better dating experiences, better dating options, and better results really in life, because it's not just what you do, right? You've ever heard about like success being about who you know? Have you ever heard that before? Well, success is more about who you know. You can have all of the abilities and the great product and stuff and whatever, but if you don't know the right people to hire you, can't collaborate with the right people, can't get in front of the right people to sell a product, you're not going to do well, right? You could be You could be the biggest genius on earth with the most valuable thing. You could have the cure for cancer in your garage. But if you can't network with the right people to get that cure to the world, it stays in the garage, right? Doesn't go very far. So these skills and connecting with other people and understanding human behavior, these are valuable skills. They're invaluable. In fact, your worth and what you offer to the world is useless without these skills. It stays in your basement. Literally. That's where it is. It's very difficult to offer value to the world and to have the type of life that you want if you aren't able to connect with the right people. And particularly in a romantic relationship or dating, that involves connecting with women, right? Seducing them. And these are skills you can develop. It's not magic. It's not chance. It's not horoscopes, right? It's not voodoo. It's not any of those things. It's not a mystery. It's not a mystery at all. Women are not a mystery. Right? When you understand the science and you understand behavioral sciences, women are not a mystery at all. They're actually very predictable. And you can get results in your life predictably when you learn this stuff. And anyways, Sexpionage is a tool to help you with that. And I'm only offering it probably this time this year when I launch it. My launch is going to be, looks like early next week. So after the weekend, that's when the launch is going to happen. I'm going to open it up for enrollment. I'm going to close enrollment, and then that's going to be it. And whoever's in the course and whoever's in my mastermind coaching groups and elite groups will have access to it. And everybody else is going to have to wait until next year before I do it again. The course material is so involved and so in depth that I want to be able to do coaching sessions with you with practical exercises so you can use it. Anything that is worth value in human behavior can get a little bit complex. So I'm going to have simple stuff that's easy to use, but I'm going to have complex stuff too. And the complex stuff might require a little bit of training, which is what we're going to do in our calls. So that stuff's going to be available to you, and all that'll happen next week. If you're not in my community for free, you probably won't be able to get the announcement and won't be able to sign up. So make sure you click that link and you do that. But anyways, that's enough for that. Okay, so let's get into the more aspects of Sexpionage as far as this video is concerned. All right. If you plan on taking the course, this is a good preliminary video to watch for it, kind of prepare you a little bit, because we're going to talk a little bit about some history and some stuff. All right. But how did this work? All right. So that's the big thing. All right. So what is this thing? All right. So here's an important thing to mention, because it's not magic words. Like, a lot of people will grift these persuasion courses or pickup courses, and it's kind of like, well, this one technique is going to get you, every girl to rip her panties off, like, it's like, no, that's not really how it works, or say this hypnotic language and the magic words, and then it gets into their brain and then they'll just do whatever you say. That's not how this stuff goes. I mean, there is such a thing as hypnotic language, but it doesn't really work that way. All right. So I got to mention that this is not like how these guys are able to seduce people and steal secrets, or how you can seduce a girl on a date. It's not like there's a magical answer. You're going to wave a magic wand and get you that. Okay. This isn't a comic book. Those of you guys have your brains polluted by the internet. You're probably already going to log off because you're like, what? There's no secret magic. Oh no. I came for the secret magic. You know what I mean? I'm going to go watch anime and go try to find somebody's course that's making empty promises. It's just not how it works. How it works is it's based deep persuasion, whether it's a spy or whether it's sales or relationship. It involves a two-way conversation or communication. So that's first of all. It's person to person, okay? If you get into marketing or public speaking, and on the government side, more of a psyop. Psyop is like pamphlets, advertising, market. That's a different game. And it is persuasive, of course. Marketing is persuasive, but marketing is a different game, a different tool. Because in marketing, you're not having a two-way conversation between two people where a relationship develops or builds. In marketing, you're having a one-way conversation with large groups of people, and you're trying to sway their way of seeing the world or the narrative through basically the material you're sending out to them. But there isn't a communication back other than, let's say, if you're marketing to try to sell something, your numbers for sales will tell you if your marketing is working, but it's not a direct two-way conversation. When we get into deep persuasion, like whether it's sales or whether it's a relationship, there's another person involved, and it's an exchange between two people, and that's how it begins. But what happens is that exchange becomes deeper and deeper and deeper. And as you get into that exchange and it becomes deeper, that other person, assuming you're leading and that you have frame, that other person gets kind of pulled into your frame and starts to see the world as how you see it and how you're presenting it. And then they start to comply with your lead and seeing you as an authority. And at that point, they will do whatever you want for the most part. Now, in my mastermind group, I get really involved in this as well because it's training. It's not something that you learn one neat trick and now you can just sort of persuade anybody. There are little tips and tricks that'll help, but it's really learning this process of connecting with another person and sort of pulling them into your leadership. And it's a valuable skill, especially if you're a man and you're going to have relationships with women because they want to be led by a dominant man. And this is exactly how you do it. But it's also important if you're like a non-commissioned officer leading a bunch of troops, or if you're a manager, you're leading a bunch of employees. You are going to be much more effective at what you do by being able to pull them into your frame and then being able to have them see the world enough. And this is what we call programming, and kind of see things the way that you see it enough to be able to comply, follow your lead. And again, now they're really willing to do quite a bit more than if they were a stranger. Should mention, if you guys got any questions or comments, of course, put them in the chat. I will address them as I go along, or I'll address them at the end. Super chats or those little things do help me. I'm not asking for your money necessarily, although if you want to give your money, that's always nice. I got to make a living somehow, but it's not really so much that. It's really the algorithms. I have an algorithm problem, though many of you have been following me know about this. So you help me by doing those little things. You know, we want to get real information out into the world, and much of what goes out into the world right now in terms of relationship dynamics is all bullshit, you know, like 90% of it, and it's designed for you to fail. So we want to really help people, okay, help guys do better, help me get the channel, you know, some exposure, even though we're working against a lot of algorithms. But anyways, that being said, I'll kind of share this and we'll slideshow it. Okay, so now this is not like this is my formula for frames. So you guys have maybe heard about frame. Some Ryan Stone wrote some books about frame as a praxeology and stuff, and that stuff's good. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff out there, but this is how I can say this is the how-to. So most people are writing about frame. Okay, even in psychology, that's where the concept comes from, psychology. And most people are telling you about it, but they're not really telling you how to do it. And so I tell you how to do it, particularly if you're in my mastermind group and you have access to my mastermind and seduction material. All right. It's a couple 100 hours of course material for those guys. But here's a little explanation for you. And I've done videos on this. You can find them in a playlist. But here's the 4 pillars of frame. And this is exactly the same, even though they didn't train. I mean, you know, I don't know what the Russians did to train their Russian, you know, male agents, right? They call them Ravens or Romeos in Germany. Like, I don't know what they did, like, you know, exact necessarily, but I can deduce from knowing about human behavior what they did, and some of my own training as well, like what they did. And it all falls into frame. It's all the same. Okay. And so the 4 parts of frame, you have programming, and programming is just how you see the world. So you want to look at frame as like, okay, that is the subjective lens in which you see the objective world. Your programming is basically how that lens is calibrated. Much of your programming, or the girl that you're on a date with, her programming is subconscious and stuff that she is not aware of, and stuff that she's not been intentional about. In other words, it's stuff that the world kind of gave to her. So her upbringing, the way that she, the way that her social circles are, and the values there, their messages, the values that she's been able to get, and the ideas and ways of seeing things that came from her culture, her background, her family, and her social circles, and the internet, right? It's a big part of it now. That causes her to see the world in a certain way. So when something objective happens, or an idea happens, or, if you guys observe or watch a reality show, watch an interaction between a man and a woman, you're going to perceive that based on your programming. You see what I mean? So now what you learn in something like the mastermind, and what you guys can start on your own without necessarily needing a course, is challenging the programming, right? You got to reprogram yourself. That's essentially what having frame is that you're in charge of the programming now and the direction that you're going. Okay. You're in charge of this lens in which you see the world, the direction in which you want to go. And you're the one who's taking it there, not having other people steer you there, right? Not having other people's ideas of what you should do be the answer of what you end up doing, and controlling your behavior. So that's what frame is. And it starts with programming on that date. How she sees you, for example, is part of the programming. So how do you decide to dress? How do you just, what location do you pick to meet up at? How do you arrange your seating? Right? How close do you sit to her in proximity? What's your eye contact like? What's your tonality like? How are you using your body and physical touch in that interaction? Or are you even doing that at all? Like, this is all part of programming. All right. Now, in of course, the spy world, this is the same thing. If you're developing an asset, you're bringing them into your area of control, if you will, right? And so, and you're merging how they see the world with yours. You're kind of combining those. All right. That way you can steer them in the direction you want. And by merging those two things together, how they see the world, how you see the world, you become essentially in a relationship. So that relationship is you develop what's called idealized isolation. So it's not necessarily physical isolation, which is what like a lot of cults will do. You end up, someone in a cult ends up on a compound somewhere, and they're isolated from their families physically. All right. That is a way to isolate people, but that's not what I suggest here with frame, or in your relationships at all. But doing so in your head, though, idealistically. In other words, when her friends, how it applies to dating, if her friends have a bunch of bad ideas about relationships, she now kind of divorces herself from those ideas, because she sees the ideas that you two have together that you're leading as better than the ideas that her friends have, who are having failed relationships. You know what I mean? And relationship drama all the time. So she went previously, before meeting you, she, was right along with her friends, in her social circles, with ideas about men and relationships. But those ideas start to change and become reprogrammed as she gets in with you. And, it becomes you and her now. You see, it becomes a bubble that you sort of create. And this could happen in the pickup world. Like, you meet a girl, you approach a set, it's a couple girls, couple guys, you're talking to new people. And then you look at the girl who is you're sort of developing the most connection with, and say, hey, I'm going to grab another drink. Why don't you come with me? And then she goes with you to go grab a drink. You've just physically isolated her, but you've created a bubble now, right? And maybe you guys grab a drink and then you take her to sit somewhere in a different place, a little bit more private. And so now she's away from her friends. She complies with that because she's attracted to you and she wants to see where things are going. So like, you've created this bubble around yourself, right? And they've talked about this in the pickup world way back into the mystery days with Mystery's book. He talks about kind of getting isolated with a girl. And I would argue too, that's the point where you know if a girl's actually attracted to you or not. Is she willing to be alone with you? All right. If a girl's wanting to be with you, she isn't willing to be alone with you, and there's got to be people around, like friends around or whatever. If she goes on a date with you, that's a willingness to go somewhere alone with you. I mean, granted, you're in public, but it's you and her, right? That's the beginning or a sign that she's interested in something more than just a friendship or a casual acquaintanceship, right? So idealized isolation is really important and critical in this spy world, in this scenario, because somebody's not going to just be like, oh yeah, let me give you some classified documents. Here you go. It doesn't work that way. They get you indoctrinated in. So these spies would get these women indoctrinated in this world and in this relationship, and then start to get them to comply with small things first. And then that would get them to comply with bigger things, like, providing classified documents. And she's doing it in a context of thinking it's okay to do it. It's right. Or if it's wrong in one way, she still feels like it's right or beneficial or whatever. Like, she's convinced herself that this is the right thing to do because in her mind, she's isolated herself with that man. You see, and it's her and that man sort of against everybody else. Now, that's definitely a way to get somebody to give up secrets, right? Is in a requirement. In fact, a requirement is that they have at least in their head an isolated bubble with you in order to give you that kind of stuff. But that's also a requirement for a healthy relationship, right? Because your relationship is only a relationship as much as what you two share together, which is also what you don't share with other people. If you're in a marriage or something, right? Or if you're with your legacy partner, you want to grow old with her, there's certain things that you two should share only between you two that doesn't belong to her parents or your parents or friends or other people or the internet or Facebook status updates, like none of that shit, right? There's certain things that are private that will always be private between you and a romantic partner. Otherwise, it's not a relationship, right? Because even a commitment implies that you're at least sexually only going to share each other sexually and not get that need met elsewhere, usually in most conventional monogamous commitments, right? So by nature of just a commitment, there's an isolation there, you see. So there is no relationship without some level of idealized isolation. You're just learning in frame on how to develop that much further in order for this person to really feel a strong sense of trust in wanting to follow your lead. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. And in a healthy relationship, it's consensual. She's following your lead because she does genuinely trust you and you are genuinely telling her the truth. You may be persuasive, but you're not being deceptive. Those two things are different. You're not being manipulative. Okay. And so she's consensually going along with a good relationship. And you guys are having a happy time, right? That's the way to go. Now, neurochemical dependency, there's got to be a sense of reward or a sense of avoidance of punishment in order for someone to be motivated to continue a relationship with you. Neurochemical dependency, another way of saying that is emotional. All right. So an easier way to say that is emotional. So having the emotions for you, okay, that's a big part of it. All right. If you're having high emotional highs, and that's sex plays a role, orgasms, romantic, physical touch, all that stuff creates this bond and this emotional high. no girl is going to be that invested in you without having these high experiences with you. All right. If it's mid or lukewarm or things are better with an ex or whatever, her motivation for wanting to get into your frame is not very high if neurochemical dependency or that emotional high that she gets to feel with you isn't there. And it's called, I say dependency, meaning she relies on you now for that. Like a girl can have some sex with any guy, right? But if she's having sex with you and relying on you for her sexual needs, for her warmth and comfort and romantic needs, that's now becomes a dependency. And it's a good thing in a committed relationship that's successful. It's obviously a bad thing if the relationship is not healthy or something like that, right? But that's an integral part of frame there. And then dread is just fear of loss, fear of losing the other person, fear of losing the relationship, because there's this dependency, because there's this programming and how she sees the world now, and that world is seen with you in it. And because of, her being isolated with you, she becomes very protective over that and doesn't want to lose it, right? There is no relationship without dread. If you're not at least somewhat concerned, like if you wouldn't be sad if you lost this person or this relationship, then the relationship isn't very important, is it? So that dread or fear of loss plays a big role in maintaining frame and in increasing attraction and desire in that and that dependency. Okay. So those are all the things about frame. All right. And frame was an integral part of this process, whether they processed it or, had it systemized the way I do or not. And that's not necessarily exactly like, that's just what they did, not necessarily what they trained. You know what I mean? But we'll cover even some of the stuff that they did do and train. So yeah. So Sexpionage, it's a shadowy corner of espionage, as I mentioned, right? And your seduction or the seduction is going to unlock those classified secrets. Okay. So it was sex or the possibility of sex that functioned as either a distraction or an incentive or cover story, or sometimes an unintended part of the intelligence operation. So in Soviet Union, female agents, for example, were used tactics, and they were referred to as swallows, and the male ones are referred to as ravens. And they commonly would set up a honey trap operation, which is designed to compromise somebody sexually, and then to be able to elicit secrets or information from that person. All right. Now, to me, and probably to you guys, it's not really much of a mystery as to how a woman would be able to seduce a man and get secrets out of him. Like that to me is like not that hard to understand, right? Most guys are simps, even guys in government, even guys, elected officials, obviously, guys with access to secrets, guys who are married or whatever, right? Guys who are, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, Epstein's list hasn't been declassified yet, has it? So obviously, very important people can get really roped up in sexual deviancy, and those people are usually men. I mean, they're women too, but with men, it's obvious. Just look at the simping that's happened throughout history, right? And so we know simping is a thing. We know this is obvious. So with that, it's not much of a mystery. A girl, some hot Russian broad meets some dude, has some sex with him, gets, tells him she's in love with him, and then gets him to give her secrets. And then if he doesn't comply, she takes photos of it. And, she has the photos that have been taken of her and him together, and then blackmails the guy. Like this isn't a hard equation. All right. It's interesting for maybe a documentary, but not super hard to understand, right? For our purposes here. But what I'm more fascinated about is the men. Okay, or the Ravens or the Romeos, right? That they were called. How were they able to seduce women? That is, I mean, we know how to seduce women here, right? But I mean, at least if you're in my stuff, but this is to another level, right? Like This is not just pickup or game. And so that's one thing that will dispel a myth right now, which kind of flies in the face of most PUA programs. All right. And that's that PUA programs have a pickup philosophy that's designed or based on the numbers game, right? So, how many girls, how many girls did you close? How many phone numbers did you get? You know, how many glaze did you get? If you guys who are trying to count that, which is, it can get really ridiculous at times because they're not counting quality, right? But it's about numbers. And the idea is like, well, okay, you have this girl at work, or you have this girl you've been friends with, or you have this crush or whatever. Don't pay any attention to that, because you need to have an abundance of women, and you need to date multiple women, and you're going to find when you add numbers to your roster, you end up finding what you want. That's the idea. And it's not a bad idea. I'm not criticizing the idea, because there is some truth to that. And usually most guys who are bad with women and not good really with persuasion and seduction, it's a death sentence for them to focus on their crush, because their crush is just an idealized version of what they're looking for. You know what I mean? And that person that they're kind of obsessed with and really want to get, usually they're going to fuck it up with that person. You know what I mean? They've already fucked it up with a previous framework, and not really being able to present themselves as that attractive, strong, masculine, desirable leader. So like, it's like fucking up the operation right before it starts. You know what I mean? At that point, you kind of have to abort the mission. And that's where most guys are at with their crushes. They don't have the skills to get the girl, and they've already fucked it up for months or years. And so it's really best for them to abort the mission. So it's not like the pickup idea of numbers game is necessarily bad. Obviously, going on multiple dates gives you a better idea of what you're really looking for, helps you develop skills. So I'm behind it. It's not to say that isn't something that's useful. However, it's kind of a myth, though, to say that you can't target a particular person. That's the idea. It's like, well, you're just going to shoot your shot with, 20 different girls, and then see who ends up on a date with you. But the reality is you can target a particular person you're interested in, because these guys proved it. They prove that with the right kinds of skills, you can pick the person that you're interested in, develop a connection, foster desire in that woman, and have yourself in a romantic relationship. And you can do it reliably with skills. So that's a game changer. That's what sexpionage skills gives you, different than pickup skills. Pickup skills are good. They're important for guys who are dating, but this is taking that persuasion to another level, because it's the same like in business. Like, you have a whale of a client who would be like, change your economic situation if you could get that client. How do you target that particular person, right? And so this is a skill set that allows you to do that. That's much different and more elevated than just the pickup game. Okay. So how they do it? Well, let's look at a case study. All right. And again, you guys get questions or anything, that's cool to ask them. Otherwise, we'll just kind of keep driving forward. So we got this case study here. Okay. So this is a case study that we're going to pull of an actual situation that happened. Okay. There's been documentaries on it. There's been books written on it. All right. Okay. I'll read the thing. So I was forever amazed at how much trouble people got into over sex. Kalugan said, catching people with their pants down was a primary way of compromising and recruiting them. As long as men would be men and women would be women, lust would play a role in the spy wars. All right. And that was from one of the books on this. Ravens and sparrows. It's not hard to figure out why guys would seduce women, But the question is, how did guys reliably single out and seduce a particular woman and get that woman so hooked that she would do anything for that raven or that guy to the point of risking her life? All right, so let's look at this case study now. Gabrielle Klein. She was engaged to her dream man for 7 years, okay? But all along, that dream guy was a Stasi agent whose job was to seduce women into handing over secret documents. Linda Presley on the Stasi Romeos, that's who wrote that, I think, who hunted Romeos who hunted in West Germany during the Cold War. So this happened in West Germany. So this is the interview of Gabrielle. All right. She said, he looked like my dream man, she recalls. And I thought, if I could ever meet such a man, I would be so happy. I fell in love with him the minute he came towards me. Deitzel introduced himself and told her he was a friend of the man she was waiting for, who was sick. Would she like to come to dinner with him instead? My first reaction was that I should get up and walk away as fast as I could, because a relationship with a man that good looking would be disastrous. But I didn't. I just didn't. All right. So that's that first part. And let's break that down for a minute. Let's break down what she had to say there. Okay. Excuse me. So here's an interesting thing, and are going to dispel another myth for you right now. These sexpionage guys that were these guys who were getting these girls, they were not super chads. So even though she's like, oh my God, he's so attractive, you need to understand that these guys were not the most attractive men, because, and I'm not saying they're ugly either, but they were more or less mid. They were above average, we could say. They weren't necessarily the tall super chads. They because here's the thing. These guys had to blend in as spies. They had to have cover stories, cover jobs, and they couldn't get caught. A guy who stands out, it has like a super jacked physique necessarily, or he's like, a guy who looks like a Calvin Klein model. If he was like that top 3% of men that all the women swipe on Tinder with, he would get noticed everywhere he went. You see how that doesn't work? So like the guys they had to send over, they had to be guys who could blend in. Now that doesn't mean that they were ugly, but they were like average men, average to above average. So when she is talking about how enamored she was with him from the start, that had more to do. She's interviewing here decades later after it happened. Okay. That had more to do with the frame that she had gotten into with him. That had more to do with the programming. Now, I'm not to say that he wasn't attractive to her, but he was probably more attractive. He was more attractive. I can almost guarantee it, because I've experienced this as well. And some of you may have as well, if you're one of my mastermind guys. She has that reaction of attraction based on your behavior. And this is stuff I talk about more in mastermind, but like the posture, the way that you're positioning yourself, the way that you talk, your tone of voice, all of those things are triggering and hitting buttons of attraction in her brain. It's not because if she had seen this guy in a magazine or in a picture with a bunch of other guys, she might not pick him out of the crowd. In fact, by design, she's not going to pick him out of the crowd, right? Because by design, he blends in. He's a spy. So it was the way in which he could present himself. That's that programming, the way in which he could present himself to her and the tone of voice he could use and the eye contact and stuff. It broke the norm for how most men would interact with her in Germany. And it made her feel connected right away. So that's an important part of this when you guys are doing pickup or dating, is to be able to connect right away like that with your tonality, eye contact, and word choices and all those things. Because what happens is it's unique. It's different from how a normal guy might approach her. And therefore, it makes her question more about the interaction. It brings attention to the interaction versus her brain just being on automatic, if that makes sense. So most of us are just on automatic all the time. And then this breaks that. And then it's, you know, a more, we could say seductive, but a connecting tone of voice and way of speaking. And then so you're breaking that pattern of normal behavior. And then it's like sparking something. It's not so much how he looked, it's how he approached. Because again, you'll see a picture of the guy in the slideshow. Again, it's like he's not a bad looking guy or anything, but he's not a super Chad, super stud. He's an average guy. And that's the way it was with all this stuff. So that dispels a myth. That dispels a myth for you. Okay. The myth of the high value man, the myth of the super Chad. It's not to say that super Chads, really good looking guys or whatever, that they don't, get girls or, of course they do. But the myth is a lot of you guys think, well, if I'm not 6'3" and like a D1 athlete, or if I don't have $1 million, then I just can't get the girls, and everything, blah, blah, everything's gonna be so hard for me. It's just not true. Seduction skills, okay, allow you to break through all those barriers. And then your looks are really more of a minimal standard, not a maximal one. If you're like 200 pounds overweight or something, right? Like if you look bad, smell bad, I mean, yeah, you're not going to have a great of an opportunity, but you don't have to be a super Chad either. There's a minimal standard. You could be like a 3 or a 4 really, and be able to seduce your way into having good relationships, good dates. I know because I've coached those guys. I've coached guys with actual disabilities and things that make them unable to present as a more attractive guy. And it's their skills in seduction that allow them to break through all that stuff. So that's a variable you need to consider. And if you're not considering that, and if you're one of those guys who's going to be on my comment section, okay, like who you are, right? Because a couple of you guys are there all the time, and you're just going to spout out some bullshit that negates the value of being able to have communication skills and seduction skills. That's an inner game problem. You got something going on up here. All right. Your confidence and your way of seeing the world is wrong. It's flawed. And you're discounting yourself from having good relationships and good opportunities because you're just, you're going with some internet platitude, which is a real shame. First of all, it's really stupid and a very low IQ thing to do. Even if you're not low IQ yourself, that is what the behavior is. And it's too bad that so many guys are buried in their emotions, buried into that incel kind of philosophy where they just don't see the value of making a connection. It's not all about looks and it's not all about money and status. And so if anything, Sexpionage missions prove that 100%. Right. And so that means you sitting here listening to this, you can develop these skills. All right. That's an important message there. And that's what this stuff proved. Now, the other thing that she had said there was my first reaction that I should get up and walk away as fast as I could. I want you to recognize that is dread. That is anxiety, right? When you approach a girl and she thinks you're hot or have a lot to offer. I experienced this actually much like a little bit older when I got a little older, where I'd have girls like so nervous that they would cancel a date, but they were high desire. In fact, my girlfriend actually she canceled and wouldn't meet up with me at first, but I assumed she wasn't interested, right? 'Cause she's a hot girl and we're just sort of DMing each other. So of course she's not interested. So I would move my focus elsewhere. And then she would just hammer and open me all the time. Right. So she was demonstrating interest, but it was like she was reluctant to meet up at first, to include like not even going on like canceling dates on me and stuff. Like, I mean, in the beginning, to the point where I had to say, listen, if you're going to cancel on me and keep doing that, then we're not going to talk anymore. And I'm just going to have to move on. You're going to kind of force me to do that. And that eventually got her to be able to go on a date with me and then meet up with me. And when we met up, it was like, we went straight to my house, like we didn't go anywhere else. So it was like a massive amount. I had built up almost too much of an attraction, even just through a text medium, and her nervousness and her anxiety was through the roof. So that's something that you need to understand. And a lot of you guys don't experience this because you're not really good. You're not there yet in your seduction skills. But when you get good at seduction skills, you'll sometimes have women who will, a lot of times actually, they'll get nervous and they will stop texting because they're afraid of texting too much, or they'll start changing their behavior in weird ways because they're attracted to you and they're afraid of blowing it, or they're afraid of getting too invested in you and then having you hurt them, or all of those things. Like, these things do play a role when you're on the higher end of the desire paradigm. All right, so that's something to learn too, is that this girl, this woman demonstrated, she stated that she was very, very attracted to him, but she wasn't hell yes. A lot of girls who are hell yes, this is what's funny too. I hear these guys who, most of them promoting the high value man trope. They'll say stuff like, if she's not a hell yes, then it's a no, kind of bullshit, right? For when it comes to dating, that guy who says that is telling, especially if he's a guy with some money or some success, he's telling me he doesn't have fucking skills. That's what he's telling me. Because the girl who's going to say hell yes to a high value man is a girl who's looking at the transactional value of going out with that guy. She's not having high attraction to him. She's not having high desire, which brings dread into the picture. She's instead going, oh, holy shit, this guy's successful. He has a nice car. He has a nice house. He has good things to offer. He wants to take me out to a nice place. Oh, yeah, I'll check those blocks. Hell yeah, I'll meet up with you. Let's do it, right? It's not to say every girl who's hell yes is not attracted, but if there is no demonstration of being a little bit nervous, like if you show up on that first date and she has no nervousness, it's actually not good. All right. So that's the lesson here, is girls get nervous when they're attracted to you. And you need to be aware of that. And that could cause them to do weird shit. So you have to know and understand women, understand seduction, and have good frame, and also have good inner game. Most of you guys, it's like going to selection or something for, special forces or some special operations. Most guys end up not selected because of what's in their head. They actually disqualify themselves. All right. Well, most of you guys do that with women, right? So it's like you disqualify yourself because of what's going on up here. And so when a girl's anxious and actually attracted to you and behaves a little different, some of you guys immediately interpret that as a lack of interest, and then you're you don't pursue it, and that's a mistake, right? So anyway, I beat that point to death. All right, back to the slideshow. Okay, so here's the picture of them. All right, look, check this hot babe out right here with the glasses. I don't know. She was probably hotter than a lot of girls now. I mean, it's a bad picture of her, right? Who knows what's going on there? Here's the guy. So he's not a bad looking guy. He's a good looking guy. He's definitely better looking than some of the other case studies, though, to be honest. But he's just a normal guy, normal mustache guy. Most of you guys listening to me right now don't look any better or worse than this guy. You know what I mean? It's about the same. So Klein was a 32-year-old translator and interpreter at the American embassy. He told her he was a physicist working for an international research company committed to world peace. So that was his cover story. Beyond that, he remained vague. 3 months later, in October 1977, the couple got engaged. Dude, so this guy seduced this bride and made her fall madly in love with him to the point where they got engaged in 3 fucking months. And it was all a cover. So that is skills, guys. That's not, I mean, again, not a bad looking guy, but I have tons of good looking guys. That guy's better looking than that guy that end up in my programs, and they don't have the seduction skills, and they're not getting some girl falling madly in love and saying, let's get married, like wanting to get married in 3 months. You know what I mean? Not even 6 months. Hell, they're not even wanting to go on a third date. You know what I'm saying? So like this dude had some serious game skills. All right. We gotta give respect where it's due. So they got engaged, and over the course of their 7-year relationship, 7 years, dude, like, wow. Klein supplied Deitzel with hundreds of secret documents from the embassy, furthering, or so she thought, his noble aims. Okay, so what are some things that made this environment ripe for women to fall for this? So there was some scarcity. So single women working for government in her town, they weren't invited to social events, and available men just were kind of scarce or felt scarce. Women who fell for it had vulnerabilities, which, by the way, all women have vulnerabilities, and these Romeos would capitalize on them. And a lot of intel had been gathered on the person to pick the Romeo that would fit her profile. So how does this apply to you, right? So there's some elements here that aren't going to necessarily apply to your dating, but actually at first you might not see it. But this does apply to you when you look at it, okay? Because really, when you look at it, okay, right now, single women have scarcity. Do you know why? Even in some place where they have an abundance of like a big city, even somewhere like New York or San Francisco or, Miami or something like that, or, Memphis, okay, like these bigger cities, okay, there's a lot less scarcity there, but there's still a scarcity, because you know what the scarcity is? The scarcity is making a real connection with a real person. You see, now in 2025, what's different now than back in 1977 is that most people are living almost entirely their entire lives in a simulation, particularly women. Women, they have their things they do in their jobs, but it's all connected to their communication on the internet. And when it comes to dating, it's all connected to this phone, right? All right, that's what it's connected to. It's connected to a screen, their Instagram, their social media. When they're talking to a guy, it's over text, it's over Snapchat. You see, everything is being filtered through a simulation. And when guys are not approaching women, statistically, ask a woman, when is the last time a guy approached you, hit you up, had a conversation with you, then asked for your phone number? Most women don't have that happen more than, they don't even have that happen like once in 6 months nowadays. Hot women too, by the way. They just don't have it happen as that often. You know what I mean? So when you, as a single guy, know how to make a connection with a woman, and you know how to do so quickly, rapidly, and then get her phone number or whatever, move things along to a date, you're breaking through the scarcity. Right now, we have it's like everybody is living in a glass apartment where they oversee a city with millions of people down below, but they're alone in their glass apartment. That's the analogy of how everyone, particularly how pretty girls, attractive single women, that's how they're kind of living their life. And the connections they do have are from simps, are from friend zone guys, are from social circles, and they feel like there's no good men available. Ask a woman sometime if they think there's an abundance of good guys and attractive guys out there. She'll tell you. Most women are like, men are trash nowadays. That's their mindset, because they don't make connections with these guys. Men are unattractive because, guys don't take care of themselves. So like, we are in scarcity. Relationships are more broken now and ever than 2025. Dating is more broken. And it's not just broken for you, it's broken for women too. And so when you're like an attractive guy, just because you know how to put on clothes, you know how to make yourself smell good, you know how to talk to somebody without being creepy, you go to the gym or go for a run every now and then so you're not overweight, you just made yourself into, you know, a valuable resource that she doesn't see all the time. And when you can confidently go up to a woman, talk to her, make her feel like good around you, and make her actually want to go on a date with you between that conversation and a few texts, you are the resource. So that's the good news. Okay. So there's a scarcity in Germany in that time with women working in government, not getting invited stuff, being socially isolated, which made women vulnerable. Well, women are vulnerable now. In 2025, they're vulnerable. They have had bad experiences. They have bad ideas about men. You know what I mean? Ask them. You don't believe me? Talk to a girl. Ask them, right? Most of what's being promoted and pushed out there is absolute trash and is a failure for women in terms of stimulating that need to connect with another person. And so when you can be that person that connects with them, you're now a valuable commodity. All right. And so as far as intel gathering, that's something I teach in Sexpionage and in my other courses. That's where you learn how to look at a girl and within 5 seconds, you've extracted a bunch of information about her. You've got a basic profile you're already working with. That's going to help you in your approach and in your conversation. When you have a 5-minute conversation with you, you can develop a basic profile right there. After a first date, you can have a pretty in-depth profile about that woman without having to be creepy about it. It's simply about paying attention to the small details and knowing what to pay attention to. That's all part of sexpionage skills. That's all part of seduction skills, is being able to do that intel, right? Grab that intel. So this stuff all applies to you, even if you don't necessarily realize that it does. All right. So the Romeos were attractive with a good backstory, but as I mentioned before, not so good looking that they could be considered the top 5%. Good looking, but average enough to blend in. All right. Which is most of you listening to me right now. And even if you're not good looking, that's okay. I don't, I'm not good looking either. All right. Doesn't matter. You can still kill it with these skills. The skills allow you to breach a lot of gaps. All right. Now, in the course of her research, I don't know how to pronounce her last name there, but one of the authors was struck by how ordinary, even this is what she had said in her research. Okay. So this is written down. Corin was struck by how ordinary, even physically unattractive, some of the Stasi Romeos were. Okay. The women definitely weren't going for good looks, she wrote. It was the old fashioned manners, flowers, whining, dining, and most importantly, these men listened to women. Men often don't. So that was very attractive. Let me read that again. It was the old fashioned manners, the whining, the dining, the flowers, but most importantly, men listened to women. Men often don't, so that was very attractive. Okay. So that was from some of the stuff that was written uh about the sexpionage missions, and that was observed. And so that is telling you what I'm telling you. It's not the way the guys looked, it's not the bullshit the internet's going to tell you, okay? And by the way, it's not that the guys just passively listened either. You got to read between the lines. They made these women feel heard. There's a difference between listening to a woman and making her feel heard and making her feel connected. Okay. So that's the difference. And one is just You can sit there and listen to somebody, but why is she going to talk to you? Right? Why is some stranger going to talk to you and to begin with? What are you going to listen to if she's not going to talk to you? How many guys have approached women, or you open a woman over text, right? Via dating app or social media, and she's cold and aloof and giving you one or two word answers, not putting much effort into the conversation. How many of you guys have had that? You're trying to talk to a girl and she just doesn't put effort into the conversation. You see, she doesn't care if you hear her or not at that point. She's not invested enough. You have to be able, it's a skill set to be able to pull that girl in from, I'm just here for my entertainment and I'm cold and aloof, into, I'm invested in this guy and I want to tell him my story. You see? So getting her to open up and want to tell you her story and then feel heard afterwards. That's not just listening. It's not like guys, it's not like you've never heard this before. Oh, you should listen to, women like guys who are good listeners or whatever. Like, most of you guys are like, okay, whatever. Like, what does that mean? Okay. It's making her feel heard. It's the listening is actually a skill set, and it's part of the seduction paradigm. So that's a skill set these guys had. That's a skill set you need to learn, not just to just passively sit there and let her talk, because she's not even going to talk to you if that's what you're expecting. It's being able to pull that information out of her and make her feel heard. That's the skill these guys had. Okay. And that's a skill evidently that I teach too. Now sex was important, but it was not most important. I would say it's an integral part, but it's not most important. For some targets, sex was in the forefront of the relationships, but for others, it was more in the background. So back to Gabrielle, she said sex didn't play a major role. It was more important for Gabrielle and a couple of other women, but actually it rarely mattered. So that was the observations according to the woman who wrote on this. All right. Now I would say without sex, it can be done without sex. All right. Because you get deep into the fantasy, but there has to be a sexual framework at the very least, psychologically and mentally. That's what's really, really important. All right. But it wasn't about the sex by itself. And here's the thing, this is what I teach in my sex material as well, right? Sexual psychology, it's about being able to connect on a deep level where she surrenders her body to you, and then her orgasms basically belong to you. Okay. And that's creates a very, very high sexual experience for her. Whether you have it once or twice or something, and then I don't know, some scenario and you're not together, or whether it's like a blitzkrieg and it's like multiple times a day or something, right? It's about the depth of what happens and the intensity of what happens, and the intensity of her sexual experience is predicated on what happens outside of the bedroom, mentally, psychologically, and emotionally, more so than what happens in the bedroom. So that's important to recognize. It's not, most of you guys are practically autistic the way you think. And it's like, you just think it's about mechanical stuff. It's not like, oh, the size of your wiener, or oh, I'm gonna, thrust her like this, like bullshit. Like, okay, look, like, it's not to say those physical skills aren't important, but they're this much important compared to the psychological skills. All right. Those physical skills in the bedroom play into the psychological framework, not really the other way around. And so her having peak sexual experience with you has to do with the seduction and the depth that you're getting with her emotionally on a seductive side of it, psychological side. So that's the big difference. That's the thing. Okay. And these girls would fall madly in love with these guys, and these guys are able to do it very quickly. In that example, 3 months she's engaged. Okay. So you guys, I mean, that's proof positive that you guys can do this. All right. So how did they do it? All right. So let's look at that. Let's look at the how. And I don't mind giving up the how because see, in I'll give you all the information here. All right. Information isn't going to help you get better. Honestly, it's a step. Information is step one. Most of you guys are stuck on step one, by the way. You're just digesting YouTube. And actually, you're worse because 90% of what's being offered out there for advice on this kind of thing is garbage. So most of you guys are polluting your brains with other content creators. And then maybe you get some good stuff from me and a couple of the people who say things that are valuable, right? So like if you're just out there, some of you guys, not all of you, obviously, but some of you guys who are just like watching YouTube shit and you watch this guy, that guy, the other, chances are a handful of what you're watching is trash anyway, isn't going to help you. There's stuff like I would say my content, and there's some other people out there that are helpful, but it's just information. And information is only step one. Okay. Step two is skill development. You have to take the information, turn those into skills. What do I do now? And then you take action on those skills. And so I give away the information for free. Most people make you pay for the information in a course. I'll give it to you for free. What happens in a course, all right, with me is skill development. And that happens through taking action, coming back with problems and things to overcome. We get you a strategy to overcome that problem. Then you go back out, take action again. It also happens through here's how you do it. Here's what you say. We end up rehearsing things, right? Do that in my mastermind calls all the time. We're going to do it in Sexpionage calls. These are the things that actually help you develop, not just the information. Information is learning about the skill, whereas skill development is actually getting better. You see what I mean? So you could, for example, digest and read all kinds of books and watch all kinds of YouTube videos on firearms and shooting, and you could become pretty knowledgeable about shooting through consuming content. But if you don't actually learn the skill set, have someone teach you how to shoot, and then go out and practice shooting, you're never going to be good at shooting. Does that make sense? So most of you guys listening to me right now, I mean, let's check you right here, okay? You're only doing step one. You guys got to do the other steps, okay? That's just the reality of it. You're not going to get any better. You can learn about skills, or you can actually learn the skills and do the skills. I'm suggesting the other half. All right. So that being said, we'll provide the information. It's the basic rundown, okay, of like the steps or the phases of an operation for Sexpionage operation. All right. So here are your basic phases. Okay. And so it started off with targeting and target selection. So target selection was, spies didn't just pick any girl to get laid with, right? They zeroed in on a particular woman or on a women, So a lot of times the reality is the scenario where your boss tells you have to seduce this particular woman. That's actually not really how it worked. They usually would be in an area and then they would try to find people that were marks. Do you know what I mean? But they still had to target. They still had to zero it in. Well, and I will say some cases the target was already prepared. Actually, a lot of cases the target was prepared and they did a psychological profile on the target to pick the right guy to match her with, so that was an important piece too. That being said, though, you can do that as well because when you understand your identity. So when in like mastermind, we do deep identity work so that you get to know, well, who's the type of guy that I am? What's my archetype? When you understand what your archetype is, then you can understand, well, what's the type of girl who's going to go for me? And that really helps you shortcut a lot in your seduction game. When you understand like what kind of girl is going to go for you and also what kind of girl you actually want, you can blend those two together and if you're out at let's say you're out on the town on a Friday night, you got, 10 women to choose from. You're going to talk to the ones that you are going to like the most yourself, but also who are better targets for you. In other words, you're not picking the hottest girl out of the 10 necessarily. You might, but that's not necessarily what you're going to do. You're going to look for the girls who are also going to see you as an attractive match. That could be done just from noticing who's noticing you when you're out there, or noticing the type of girl that matches you and your type, right? Like, what are you wearing on a Friday night? Are you wearing like a suit? You know what I mean? Like button down shirt, no tie, suit, nice watch. Certain type of girl is going to go for that, right? Are you more casual with baseball cap and a flannel? Like, you know what I mean? It's certain type of girl's going to go for that. Both girls are hot. Both girls look good naked. Both girls are probably good relationship matches, but it's just there's certain archetypes. And a lot of that has to do with your environment. But, we blend those things together, and I teach you how to do that in mastermind. That's in the mastermind stuff. But targeting is kind of important. And when you are out there, you can elevate your level of success versus just talking to any girl or every girl. You can elevate your level of success by knowing who to select and who to choose, So that was a big part of their process, is targeting. Now, they obviously had to seek out women who had secrets, right? And then who were good and fit the profile for them to go talk to. Number 2 was the approach. So they had to be able to put themselves in to the girl's orbit. These guys are trained to blend in, but they're also trained to be charming. So they could do both. They could blend in or stand out. All right. And remember, they're not these chads. In fact, according to that person who wrote one of the books on this and wrote some resource material on it, is that a lot of the guys weren't good looking at all. All right. But they were able to clean up and look the part. So they looked the archetype that this girl would want to talk to. And then they would target an approach at cafes or a party or even casual street game, like a train station or walking down the street. And so they knew how to make it seem casual and accidental. So this can help your approach with women in your pickup. It makes making it so that it wasn't this direct game with a lot of fake infields like to show real direct game, and a girl just magically like falling for the guy. And those are bullshit, I mean, it does happen that way sometimes, but not even close to all the time. So creating a casual encounter and making it seem accidental, that made it disarming for the women, and it felt like fate to them. And that was really important. So remember, a girl is the star of her own play, right? She's the main character in her own story. So when she meets a guy that she wants to fall for, she wants it to be a romance story. She doesn't want it to be some trashy, shitty story. Okay. So you are in part helping her author that story. And that starts from how you approach her and how you treat her in the beginning and how that thing unfolds and develops. All right. That's part of the seduction game. Part 3 was trust. So building trust. Now, for these guys is a bit of a long game, but again, not that long. That one girl was engaged in 3 months, right? But they would know how to push pull. They knew how to get the girl to qualify to them and to show that interest and then reciprocate with the right calibrated amount of affection, escalating the relationship. So they did the dinners, the letters, back then letters, right, versus texts, maybe even the flowers, right? They were gentlemen. They wooed the girl, but it's not wooing the girl the way simps and weak men think that a guy should woo a girl, which is just qualifying to her, worshiping the ground she walks on, all that stuff. It's a push pull, and that's a technique, and that's a skill. And these guys had that skill, and they use that to build trust, because as going back to frame, as that emotional dependency and bond grows, the level of trust grows to a point where she'll trust the guy with anything just because of her emotional and sexual attraction to him. Okay. So physiologically, they tapped into a need for her validation. And studies on human behavior show that these bonding experiences trigger the dopamine, trigger oxytocin, and trigger feel good chemicals. And over time, the women would associate the spy with happiness and sexual desire. And so when they had that bond and that feeling, it was over. They could do whatever they wanted. And so from then, they would use that bond and they would deepen it. So this is where they created, as I mentioned in my formula, idealized isolation. They'd get these women to share vulnerabilities and parts of their secret life that would, they wouldn't tell anybody else. And they would share things and parts of themselves that they wouldn't share with anybody. Right. And so that made them vulnerable. And the guys, too, would make themselves vulnerable, even though it was fake in cover stories. But they would mirror the woman's feelings, emotions, in a sense, and they would lead her to higher emotions. And it created this us against the world kind of a vibe. Once they had her in that deep bond, she would do anything for them and rationalize the reasons why she did it. This is where women have that rationalization hamster, right? Meaning that they rationalize what they do. And a lot of guys get frustrated with that. Like, oh, she doesn't see that she did something wrong. She's just rationalizing it away, right? Well, yeah, women do that. But guess what? They do that based on their feelings. So if you know how to have frame and seduce, she'll do all the rationalizing for you in order to want to be with you. You just have to sit back and let it happen. All right. And that's what these guys would do. And then, they'd build this relationship with them and they would seal that emotional hook. And then last thing is they would, would be the ask. So the ask would be where they would build authority through compliance. They'd get her to do things. Now that would start in the beginning. All right. And they rarely demanded secrets outright. They weren't like, okay, you're going to give me this, it was subtle. It'd be like, can you help me with something? Or I need this, I just need to understand this thing for us, or I need this for this project I'm working on, and the woman who's now in love didn't see that she was betraying her government usually at first. She thought she was helping the guy that she's madly in love with. And the guy would do exactly what I talk about when I talk about the universal law of female mate selection, which is he would reduce the risk in her mind. Like, oh, it's fine. It's not a big deal. And then increase the feeling of reward. Oh, this would really help me. This would help me in my research project for this, thing I'm doing for world peace, or this would really help us or whatever. They would increase the sense of reward, reduce the sense of risk. She's saying yes, supplying secrets, and she doesn't even realize that she's like thinking it through, like she's doing something wrong. But once she then starts the behavior, once the realization kicks in that she's doing something wrong, now she's already trapped because she's already been doing it. She's already broken the rules. So now where can she run to for safety? If she broke the rules, where can she go? Well, she's going to go to the man that she's in love with, right? So she's already broken the rules, and her only solution in her mind is to keep breaking them and to do whatever this guy says, because that's the only thing that's going to keep her safe. And so that is how this stuff would unfold. Okay. Now you can learn a lot about this, a lot about your relationships, a lot about, from these case studies, from these scenarios. So the brilliance was just in these guys is how they were able to, it wasn't just a magic word, right? It wasn't like learn this cool, neat trick. Certainly in Sexpionage, I'm not going to have just one neat trick for you. And that's the course. It's the skill and ability to pull her into this world in web. Now, that's how it's done in a deceptive mission setting. Okay. But how are you doing this in relationships? It's not deceptive. That's the difference. The difference is you actually need to be able to do the same exact thing in order to secure a happy, healthy relationship. But the difference is you're not deceiving her. You're telling the truth. She knows the truth and sees the benefits and consents. She also knows the risk, whatever risk there is. And she's has high emotion for you and high desire for you. And she sees you as her best choice, and she's willing to change parts of her life in order to follow you. All right. That's the biggest thing. All right. And that's where the frame comes in. Okay. So now our agencies don't really care about doing this like this. Like, so CIA and stuff, they don't really, as far as I know, aren't really doing this anymore. We dabbled in it, but we also dabbled in things like remote viewing and psychic powers and weird shit that mostly didn't, come up with reliable results. We'll put it like that. It's not that Sexpionage didn't get reliable results, because we got a ton of case studies where it did. But for our governments, it's actually a high investment. We're putting somebody at risk we have to train as a government. So they go through $1 million of training just to fucking get out there and try to get secrets. And then they're going to complicate things with a romantic relationship. You see, with technology nowadays and with the way that we source nowadays, we don't need to complicate that relationship between, between the agent or and the caseworker and the person he's extracting information from. We don't need the target, right? We don't need to like complicate that with a romantic relationship, because romance and sex makes things way more complicated. You know what I mean? And can make things more complicated too for the caseworker. So that's that. Okay. Like, we don't use that quite as much anymore. That's not to say other countries aren't doing this today. I mean, they probably are trying to, at least. So that's just the thing. But this was a thing when technology wasn't as advanced as it is now. And it was very successful because of how seduction and desire works. And look, this goes back to a point I made on one of my videos recently. And I think I have another one I'm going to drop to hammer it home, because I'm really annoyed, actually, that the majority of people out there seem to think this way. And that's this idea of relationships being an exchange of value or transactional. If you've ever experienced desire from a woman, you know that that's bullshit. You know it's not true. These women were willing to forgo and risk their transactional well-being, so to speak, to be with men who they were attracted to and had desire for. They're willing to risk to the point of, potentially getting put in prison or in jail. They were risking it all just to give these guys what they wanted, because their desire was high. So relationships are not just an exchange of value. Relationships involve an emotional connection that transcends transactional needs. That's if you're in a high romantic relationship. Unfortunately, 80% of men have not experienced that, right? So when people write books and talk about it on the internet or whatever, and talk about relationships being an exchange of value, they talk about the transactional relation. All relationships are transactional. Yeah, 80% of the fucking people are like, yeah, that makes sense. And they're stupid and they don't know. And the reason why they don't know is because they've never experienced it. And it's annoying. The reason it's annoying is because it sets you up for abysmal absolute failure. If that girl is not in high desire for you, where it transcends the transactional aspect, don't be in a commitment with her, man. Don't do it. Just have sex every once a week and send her home, whatever it is. Don't get involved, seriously, because Transactional relationships mean that you are going to be exploited as a man. If her desire is not high enough for her to be able to be emotionally bought in and to want to follow your lead, there is no relationship you should be in. You turn into a resource slave for this woman. You turn into a slave to this woman's transactional need, and a whole relationship is basically a negotiation. And you're negotiating for sex, and she's negotiating for everything else because her buy-in and her desire isn't high enough for you to put sex on the table as a high need, to put her connection to you and her love for you on the table as a high need. You see what I mean? Desire is like bringing a pistol to the negotiation table and pointing it at somebody's head, and then they are now forced to do whatever you say. That's not a negotiation, right? It's either coercion, and in the case of desire, it could be coercion, but it's really just a high emotional buy-in. So that model sucks, and a lot of you guys think that way because you've never experienced. That's how I know when some dude, whether it's some psychologist or content creator, whoever, gets on and he wants to talk about relationships or an exchange of value, I know that guy doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. Seriously. It doesn't matter what other things he says that are correct. It doesn't matter what other things that are like good, maybe, whatever. The problem is there's too many, 90% of people out there are giving you guys shit. The reason they're giving you shit is because they don't fucking know. All right. So like I've had it. It's 2025. It's only gotten worse. So I'm fucking done. And I'm not going to call out people like individually because it's not that the guy or the people that do this are necessarily bad people. They just need to change and improve stuff. Look, when I'm lacking something, like how do I digitally market better, for example, that's something I've been lacking getting better at. I seek help out. I seek out advice from people who know more than me. Okay. And it's more important to give you guys the truthful information that will allow you to be successful than it is to protect somebody's brand. So I don't give a fuck about their brands. Okay. If they're wrong, they need to check themselves, correct themselves. They can DM me, call me. We can discuss it. I can fix them. I've actually coached a number of guys who are on the internet coaching. All right. So that they can at least put out accurate information that's going to help men. All right. Help you guys out. But anyways, that was a tangent and I went off on it, and that's okay. But I did it for a reason, because desire is important. And I want you guys to understand how powerful desire can be for a woman. And that's any woman. All right. And in fact, desire is a requirement for any of this to work. Don't get married. Don't have kids. Don't even commit yourself in any way to a woman who is not having high enough desire for you to exceed some of those transactional needs, right? Not that she has to give up things up necessarily to be with you, but it's the fact that she would be willing to. That's the point. And so, if anything at all, these stories about how these spies were able to seduce women, it tells you how important desire is. And it's a myth to think that it's not. It's a myth to think that desire and emotional connection is on the same tier as economic viability or being a good dad potential or having a nice house. All of that other shit takes a back seat once emotions get into the picture. All right. That's how people get in trouble. That's how you guys get in trouble. Your emotions get involved. Her emotions aren't as involved as yours. Next thing you know, you start giving up your transactional needs and sacrificing them for her. That's how you got in trouble before, right? So anyway, that's the message. Okay. Now let me look at comments. Not a ton of them. That's okay. The secret is hard work over a long time. Yeah, that is. And I would say it's not as hard though as people make it out to be, though. Honestly, like really just one month of coursework and a guy will completely change his whole life. You are correct though. It is over time though. And sometimes the work can seem hard, but it's really just over time. It's making constant little improvements on a weekly basis that's going to get you to where you want, whether it's in business, with women, with anything. Just don't give up and you just keep driving forward, right? Um, Here's a question. So, online money. How do you deal with woman version of you and real you? I don't know. I'm not sure what you mean. So I'm not sure what that question means. How do I deal with the woman version? How do you deal with woman version of you? I don't know what that means. So I'm going to suggest, because we're towards the end here, that you get in my school community, ask that question again, but in a lot more detail. All right. And I'll be happy to answer it there. You'll get some feedback from the other guys. Well, again, I hope you guys enjoyed today's pod class. All right. I want you to do me a favor, because, again, the algorithms are not friendly to me because I tell the truth. And 90% of what's out there is really leading you to failure. I mean, that's the truth. That is a fact. And so those other things that are high, that are produced well enough, are going to catch on and get 800,000, 900,000, a million subscribers. Whereas I'm here and I'm going to struggle to get messages out, because what I say isn't always something that YouTube algorithms finds to be something they want to promote. All right. So the algorithms are just not friendly to me. I don't fit the demographics for them, and I'm not feminist. So and I'm not neutral enough, or walking the balancing beam enough for them, because if I do that, I can't tell you the truth. So I can't sacrifice truth for grifting. I can't do it, which means I need your help, right? You need to subscribe. All right. A lot of people watch my stuff or have not hit the subscribe button. I need you guys to do me a favor and fix that. All right. Because that helps me get the message out to more people. And then the last thing is, of course, join my community. And I hope to see you in Sexpionage 2.0. All right. We got a lot of good stuff coming, and that's going to drop next week. If you're in my community, you'll get the announcement. And that's it. All right. Cool. Take care.